Today's episode is titled, I Was Spoiled and Didn't Know It. Subtitle, there are very few truly poor people in the United States. Now, before I get a lot of hate mail, people screaming at me, telling me, how dare you can say that? I am sitting over here with no food in my fridge, or I can't afford to buy my kids' school clothes. Just hear me out, okay? First of all, I grew up on welfare. My whole family, my family, my mom, my brothers, and me, we never had the in-style clothes. We couldn't afford, luxuries like a telephone. That's something that we really never had in the home, which was terrible because being, a young teenager and you got to have a phone to talk to your friends, but we could not afford a phone. We could not afford cable. There were many times I can recall when we didn't have electricity or gas or, anything like that, basic necessity utilities, because my mom couldn't afford to pay the bill and it would get shut off. I remember getting free lunches at school. I remember we lived on food stamps. I remember we had church donations and things like that. Anything that had to do with welfare, we were on it. And I grew up thinking that I was poor. When I grew up, I was poor when I was a child living in a trailer, a roach-infested trailer, or a house with holes in the wall. I remember one year a huge snake coming through my bedroom, and I remember, mold on the ceilings. And, my mom did the best she could do, and we always had a roof over our head. We always had food in our stomachs. But when you're poor in the United States, these things tend to take on a different meaning. And what I mean by that is a lot of people think they're poor, but they're really so far from being actually poor that it's laughable. And I was one of those people. Now, I'm not going to use, the example, people, if you think you're poor, look at the people over in Africa. Even though that's completely legit, it's totally relatable, but I'm not going to go that far. I'm going to go just to our next door neighbor over here in Mexico, which is where I'm currently living with my husband. But even before I moved here, I started to understand that I was never really poor when I was growing up. Just because I couldn't afford Reebok shoes, just because I couldn't afford Guess jeans, just because I was on free lunches at school, just because that did not mean that I was poor. Just because my mom had to work 2 and 3 jobs to support us did not mean that we were poor. When I met my husband, like I said, I began to learn what the meaning of poor really is. He grew up living on a dirt floor, sleeping on a dirt floor, with 7 other siblings, and his mother and his father all in a 1-room shack. Okay? Dirt floor. Holes in the wall, or gaps in the wall where the boards were just, slapped together, because it was a literal shack. We actually live currently on the same property that my husband grew up in. There's now a concrete house there, but still there's no glass in the windows. There are no doors on the outside of the structure. I want to call it a structure because it's not finished. There is one window, I'm looking at it from here, and it's just boarded up. And this is just to keep the feral cats out, okay? But inside that structure, even still today, there's dirt floors and unfinished concrete floors. And, you know, it's kind of surreal to be here after hearing all of these stories that I've heard about how my husband lived when he grew up. But I really thought, wow, how in the world could I have ever thought that I was poor living in the United States? There are so many programs for low-income families in the United States that I don't understand how anybody can think that they're poor. Just because you don't make enough money from your job, just because you can't go to the store, to the mall, and buy the dress for the party next week. Just because you can't afford to buy your kids a $500 PlayStation. Just because these things are true does not make you poor. Because you have to live on welfare does not make you poor. It makes you low income. And, it qualifies you for government assistance. But the definition of poor between the United States and other countries is so far apart that you have to wonder who made up this rule? Who in the United States started this thing where they, just because they couldn't afford a pair of Nike shoes, they were poor. And that's how a lot of people live there. That's how I grew up there. And when I look back on it now, I realize I had everything that I needed. I even had more than what I needed. Just because my mom didn't give it to me, or, it didn't come out of her paycheck, didn't mean that I was poor, because I still had these things. I still had access to, all kinds of government programs. And let me, off the top of my head, list off some of these things. We have food stamps. That's probably the biggest one. I lived on food stamps before I had my own kids and moved out of the home, but we had food stamps then, and I had food stamps with my kids. And we qualified for, I think, up to over $700 a month, every single month in food. And now that I'm living here and we go grocery shopping, we don't use food stamps, and things are actually more expensive here than they are in the United States, which is a huge misconception about Mexico, but that's beside the point. I realized that if we just managed our money better and bought the things that we needed instead of going and getting our food stamp. How many are guilty of this? Food stamp day comes, right? And we head to Walmart, or we head to Kroger, or whatever store you shop at, and we buy all the fancy stuff. We buy shrimp. We buy tons of meat. We buy all kinds of packaged cookies and candy and cake stuff. And we buy lots of ice cream. And basically, we just buy the stuff that we just really crave. The junk food, the sugar, everything that's going to give us diseases later, right? And we just pack our carts full. I don't know how many times I've walking down the aisle with my cart and my little bit of items in the cart, and I see a lady walking past me with a couple kids like me, and her cart is so full, overflowing. I just can't. What is she going to do with all that stuff? She can literally eat all that stuff in 1 month, and most of it's just junk. It's just junk. She doesn't want to cook, which is fine, but come on. $700 a month in food is a lot. We don't spend that much here, okay? We spend way less than that, and stuff is more expensive here. And the reason why we don't spend that much here is because we are more careful with how we spend our money. But when, you get it from the government, and of course I'm not saying everybody does this, but I'm not saying I didn't do it, because I did it. like every month for many years because I just didn't think right. I didn't, have a budget. I didn't care about that kind of thing. I'm not sure why, but that's the way it was. I didn't go with the list. I didn't buy just the things that I needed. I bought a crap ton of stuff that I didn't need. And that's not how to manage money, okay? So, we get this free money from the government because we qualify for it. But then we don't know how to manage it. We don't know how to budget it. We don't know how to not buy the things that we don't need. So then we say, back to the point, it's not enough. And there were times, even me, that $700 did not last me for a whole month. And if the situation were now and I was raising 3 small kids, I guarantee you I would have the $700 last the whole month and still have plenty left over. I can guarantee you that, because $700 a month in food is a lot, even with prices going up really high. You just have to know how to spend it. You have to know how to make sacrifices if need be. Not all the time do we even need to make sacrifices. So the point is, food stamps is a huge thing in the United States. In places like Mexico, they don't have that. If you don't have money for food, you starve. You either grow it yourself, pluck it yourself, slaughter it yourself, or you live off the kindness of strangers. So the next thing is Medicaid, or in Arkansas, it's called Our Kids First, I think, now. But when I grew up, and when my kids were younger, it was called Medicaid. Yes, the healthcare system in the United States is terrible. My personal opinion, I think it needs to be universal, like it is in Canada. There are problems with that. I know, again, we're not going to get all political and everything here, but medical debt is massive in the United States. For many years, I had terrible credit because my medical bills, I just couldn't afford to pay them. But because my kids were under the age of 19, they qualified for Medicaid. And they went to the hospital plenty of times. But I never paid a bill. Never once did I pay a hospital bill, emergency room, clinic, or even prescriptions because of that program. So that's massive. It's still today. It's a little change from it was before, but it still exists. Then there was WIC, Women's, Infant, and Children's. I had this for every single one of my kids. It starts in your pregnancy and ends 3 or 4 years. I don't remember. I just know that after the pregnancy, maybe it was a year, I don't know, but it continues. And it's basically you get a voucher and you get milk and cereal and peanut butter and eggs and other types of pretty big list of food. It has to qualify certain kinds of food, but it was free. And you get it every single month, free. You don't get nothing like that here. So there's another one. Then we have utility assistance. Now, I admit this one is a little, or for me personally, in my own experience, is a lot harder to get. I remember one year my light bill, it was one summer, my light bill was over $300 because we ran the air conditioner. This is super, super hot summer that year. And I sat in, I think it was like an auditorium, a school auditorium somewhere, for 7 hours one day. Maybe this isn't a good example, but I'm still going to use it. I sat in this place for 7 hours, had all my paperwork with me, for them to deny me in the end. But the point is here that I'm trying to make is that it does exist, and a lot of people benefit from this. Do you think that anybody here in Mexico is going to go down to a local wherever and they're going to give them money to pay their utility bills? Nah, that doesn't exist here. And I'm sure it doesn't exist in a lot of other places. And that's also kind of the same. There's also assistance for low-income families to have a cell phone and internet service. It's very limited, but it exists. And it's better for elderly people, or families with kids in the house that need to be able to access the internet for their work and such. But it exists. There's no way you're going to go to an office here and they're going to give you free internet or a free cell phone. No way. No way. Then we have child care vouchers. I never used these, but I knew people that did. And if you're a parent of a young child who is still needs a babysitter or daycare, then you probably know that daycare in the United States, childcare, is extremely expensive. It can cost more in childcare every week than what you make every week. Some parents will stay home. They won't even get a job. Especially if it's a two-parent household, at least they're lucky. But if it's a single-parent household, they're kind of, in a hard position because they need to go to work, but they don't have anybody to stay home with the kids. So there are child care vouchers for this situation, and they can pay up to half to all of your child care fees every single week or month or however it is they do it. No way they're going to do that here. No way they're going to do that in a lot of places. Now, this is one that I definitely benefited from: housing assistance and housing vouchers. Some programs will, after you qualify, they'll give you a voucher and you can go look for an approved home. And a lot of landlords sign up to be on the housing voucher program. Then there are like apartments and things that are just, they're based on your income, and as long as you qualify and there's a slot for you, sometimes there's a waiting list, but you can easily get an apartment. That's what I had, and not pay anything, a little bit of money every month to nothing at all. And here's what I lived in for over a decade. It was me, my 3 kids, in a giant 4-bedroom, 2 full bath apartment with all utilities paid. And I only paid, because it was based on my income, I only paid $76 a month. Wow. I even still think that is just amazing, because rent is so high and it's so hard to find a place to live because you can't afford to rent somewhere that's decent, that's not like it's roach infested, I was explaining earlier, or something like that. But this was a very decent apartment. They kept it clean, they kept it painted, they kept the maintenance up. There are places like this, and they're not like these, hard to find, like little treasures that you have to go on a scavenger hunt. All you have to do is Google it, and you will find a list of housing of apartments that allow housing assistance. I benefited from it for a long, long time, and it had not been for that apartment that I lived in, I probably never would have written my bestseller book and made my money and was able to get out of the welfare system entirely. It was really thanks to that apartment that I lived in. Now, this one is a little controversial, but it's still a way that people make money every single year in the United States. But like food stamps and WIC and any kind of government handout, there's always going to be dishonest people. But when it comes to filing taxes, earned income credit every year, the EIC, some people do take advantage and abuse that. I'm not going to get into all that, but I've heard of people doing this before. It's a terrible thing, but it happens all the time. But I qualified for it every year. And because I had 3 kids, the more kids you have, the more money you get back at the end of the year for taxes. And every single year, I got back over $7,000 because I had 3 children. And I was a single parent, and I was low income. So I was right in the proper bracket to make this money every single year. $7,000, okay? just my earned income credit sometimes was like almost close to what I made the whole year. It's just baffling to me how this money, where do they get this money to give to everybody? It's crazy, but it's there. It exists. As long as you qualify for it, it's money. It's free money. It's like the United States is just throwing away money, not throwing away. A lot of people need that money, but like I said, there's a lot of people who abuse it too. But it's just amazing to me. It just shows how rich this country is. So there's that one. Then we have the churches and the food banks. If you don't qualify for food stamps for whatever reason, or you need food, something happened and you need food right now, and then it's going to take a little bit longer for the food stamps to kick in, you always find the churches and food banks. There's food banks separate from churches, and there's churches with food banks, okay? And most churches will do it 2 days a week, but there's so many that do it. And there's so many people who donate the food to these churches, like the people who attend the churches, but even outsiders, just to do the good deed, will go and drop off a big box of food, of canned goods and boxed foods and things like that. And if you don't have any food, and you don't even have to prove that you're on hard times, you just go to the church and you tell them, I need some help. Even if it's on a day where they're not doing the donations, I guarantee you go to a church and find the pastor or someone who works there and say, look, I'm having a really hard time. Can you help me? 9 times out of 10, they're going to go back there and get you a box of food. They may even go a step further, and this is another one on my list, and take you into their clothing section. Because even for people who don't have clothes, or maybe you need an outfit to wear for a job interview or something, you can go in there and you can find whatever you need. From the outfit itself, to the accessories, to the shoes, if you're a woman, even purses. This stuff is free. They just give this stuff away. Then we get to the really good free stuff, because sometimes you find gems. And some of you might be opposed to this, but hear me out. You can find free stuff on the side of the road or in the newspaper in the free section, in the giveaway section. In Arkansas, in the Democrat Gazette, it's called the giveaway section. I found one year a hot water heater, and we needed one. Ours went out. Free hot water heater. There are people who are dedicated to going around the neighborhoods, and every morning or real early before the trash trucks get out there, because so many people just throw out stuff, just toss out like really great stuff on the side of the road because they just get sick of looking at it, or it's filling up their house, or they have no use for it anymore. They bought a new one. It wasn't broke, but they bought a new one. People throw out stuff all the time. People who, just want to be generous and try to give someone a chance before just throwing it out on the road, they put it in the newspaper. Hey, come pick up this hot water heater. Come pick up this air conditioner. Come pick up this stove. Like, there's so many things that you can find for free. Just free in the United States. And then, not necessarily free stuff, but the amount of yard sales in the United States every single day. Most yard sales happen between Thursday and Sunday, but yard sales are massive business in the United States. You can find so much stuff, so much cheap, dirt cheap stuff at yard sales that, you don't need to make a lot of money in order to fill everything in your house, every room in your house with your needs, your basic needs, plus your accents and your knickknacks and your floor rugs, yard sales. And that's also the same with going to like the Goodwill and the Salvation Army, places like that. You don't find places like that here. Definitely not. Here, if you see something on the side of the road, which is rare, it's, you don't really see anything on the side of the road. But when you do see something on the side of the road, it's literal trash. And I'm talking lots of trash just everywhere, but that's beside the point. Yeah, you don't find things like that here. You don't find yard sales. You find people having like little stores in their homes trying to sell stuff at like really high prices, like used clothes for super high prices, because that's how they make a living here. They don't know that stuff is like dirt cheap, and what does it matter to them anyway in the United States, because they don't live there. But that's another way that, you can just get so much stuff. There's disability insurance. I'm not going to get into all that, but I know people who make over $1,000 a month because they're considered disabled. There is a program called Transitional Employment Assistance. And then, of course, there's unemployment insurance. I've even been on unemployment. They have an unemployment program here, but it's almost like it's fake. I don't know how anybody could live off their unemployment assistance in this country. It's just definitely not worth it, I guess you can say. And then there are grants and all kinds of things in this country. Opportunities. I'm baffled at how we can continue to pretend like we're poor, or like we were poor. You grow up and you tell, I was poor. I didn't have this or I didn't have that. And really what it means is that you just didn't have what you wanted. You didn't have, like I said, the in-style clothes, the Nikes or the Reeboks. You didn't have the Gucci bag. No, we were poor because we were on welfare. Well, you may have been considered low income because you qualified for welfare, but you weren't poor because the welfare supplemented the income that you could not make. The food stamps supplemented the money for food that your parents could not make, or you could not make on your own. All these programs, all these things that are absolutely free. There's no reason, really, anybody in the United States and other countries could ever say that they were poor. Now, of course, there are some people, there are those, cases where people are living on the streets, but that's another topic, because there are a lot of people living on the streets because they choose to live there. They don't want to get a job. They want to, continue to do what they want without any responsibilities. But there are people who are genuinely poor. For whatever reason, they're going through these really tough times and they need help. But I think for the most part, according to the people that I have seen and met, who have all claimed to be poor, none of these people were ever poor. They just didn't have the stuff that they wanted. They didn't have the life that they wanted. And in the United States, we just take so much for granted. Even simple things like electricity and water and gas. Don't have that here. We have electricity, but it doesn't work half the time. The water, that's a huge situation for us. It doesn't just flow magically through our pipes. We have to go and get it and bring it back. The, gas lines, non-existent. Maybe in the big cities, in Mexico City or something, but definitely you're not going to go into any house within 100 miles from here or more and just, turn on a stove. There are some that have butane tanks and things like that, but it's rare. Most people here cook outside. So the point I'm trying to make is that, I was spoiled my whole life and didn't know it. I remember when I first came here, I was complaining about I couldn't find blueberries to put in my oatmeal. I was complaining about not being able to find cream or coffee syrups. I couldn't find cold brew coffee, in Walmart. Like in Walmart in Arkansas, I could easily just walk back there and get my cold brew coffee and be on my way. But here it doesn't exist. And I was always complaining about like, oh, how can these people like not have anything, and that made me like, wait a second, I'm really complaining because I don't have blueberries to put in my oatmeal. And that really got me to thinking, like, what is wrong with me? So anyway, I want you, if you're anything like I just described, I just want you to realize how much you do have, how much you probably have. I don't know your situation in particular, but instead of looking at the situation as you're poor, you can't afford this, you can't afford that, look at what you do have and the resources you have that supply a lot of the things that you might have, and be grateful for that, because so many people in other parts of the world, and even in the United States, there are some people who, for whatever reason, don't qualify for certain programs. But there's always something. I can't really see anybody in the United States being as poor as I have seen the people living here in shacks and washing their clothes on a stone outside. And it just made me appreciate more the things that I did have that I didn't realize I had in the beginning or a long time ago or my whole life. And I feel really kind of ashamed that I ever thought, wow, why do I have this, or why can't I have that? It's just really shallow and selfish how I thought sometimes. And I'm definitely glad I don't feel that way anymore. I don't think that way anymore. I'm very grateful for what I have. And the things that I don't have, obviously I don't need, because God would have given them to me already. So I'm happy with what I have and what I don't have. I'm going to be okay. And I think you will too. So please just think about that next time you start feeling down about what you might not have. Because 9 times out of 10, there's a 99.9% chance that you're not poor. You're just not managing right, or you're not thinking in terms of being poor or having what you need. You're thinking more along the lines of what you just want. And you think you need these things that you want when really you don't need them. They're not necessities. So I just needed to get that off my chest. It's just something that's been bothering me, feeling like I am poor, or I grew up poor, when now I realize I never was. I was very rich. I had family. I had a few friends, but mostly I had my family, and we always had a roof over our head. We always had food in the fridge and in the cabinets, no matter where we got it, whether it was from welfare or from a neighbor or from a church, or whether our mom went and bought it herself with her check. We always had food. It might not have been food that we particularly liked sometimes, but we still ate and we didn't starve. We were not poor. We had toys. Every Christmas, family members and friends and no matter whether we were poor or not, my mom always found a way to get us Christmas presents every year and birthday presents every year. So, so many people don't get anything like that. And I just wanted to say that. So until next time, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.